Thank you, Joe. Hello, I'm Chris. I'm the lay Catholic chaplain at HMP Leeds. And as curious a statement as I ever find it to say, I continue to enjoy my role, as it's not only a ministry, but an absolute privilege. I used to be, as Joe says, a secondary English teacher by trade, but the more serious my prayer life grew, the more evident it became I couldn't sustain both branches and that my faith and daily life needed to become intertwined. I'll shortly begin by mentioning two saints I find particularly compelling when considering prisons and the people housed within them. The first, Saint Dismas, otherwise known as the Good Thief, who was crucified alongside Christ. A criminal in his day, 2,000 years ago, receiving social justice at the hands of the Romans. His example, however, of accepting his punishment as just, then recognizing Jesus' divine nature, and in turn being assured of his admission to paradise, is a wonderful exchange for all, but surely holds special meaning for prisoners. Namely, Christ, whilst dying, rewards the faith of a humble criminal. The second saint would be that of St. Maximilian Kolbe, the Polish priest and martyr who offered his own life in a Nazi concentration camp to save the life of a fellow prisoner who had a family. St. Kolbe, albeit a prisoner like St. Dismas, suffered at the hands of human injustice and at the sheer will of an evil empire imposing its tyranny upon every life it could. Once again, we have an incredible example in the face of genocide, rampant cruelty, and absolute despair, with his heroic sacrifice. Building upon the humble redemption we see with the Good Thief, here we see that Christian witness is possible in all places, even in a jail setting. Justice and mercy, as the name of the Caritas Leeds report, have been two key themes of these efforts into investigating criminal justice. So Joe has asked me to offer a few reflections from my role. The majority of prisoners have a surprisingly honest vision of their offences and culpability and are quick to accept time in jail as justice for their choices. The Good Thief's part in Scripture is a keen example of how earthly justice pales in significance to divine justice, while St. Kolbe's experiences serve to warn us how human evil can so badly corrupt our supposedly fixed pillars of justice and fairness. Indeed, some of the Pharisees believed they were protecting their faith from a troublesome blasphemer, but their obsession with supposed justice had their ears blocked and their eyes blinded from Christ's true nature. The concept of justice has become more of a widespread conversation in 2020, I'm sure you'd agree, amidst the COVID-19 lockdown. People of all ages, ethnicities, backgrounds have found themselves unwilling prisoners in their own abodes. Not long after such self-imposed conditions, does the human experience lead to anxiety, fretful thoughts, and negativity. Likewise, as the economic turmoil unfolds, people raise more questions about undeserved suffering, again, much like the prisoners I meet on a day-to-day basis. During the height of the lockdown, the numbers of prisoners who made wry comments to me about the greater population now experiencing their lives was staggering. Justice, in an earthly sense, remains front and center in people's minds. As the Catholic chaplain, I try to nudge that perspective to match that of the Good Thieves. Yes, respect the earthly one, but focus on the divine justice. The second theme, then, that of mercy, is obviously a characteristic that the role of prison chaplain is built upon. My daily tasks include pastoral visits, welfare check-ins, making phone calls to the loved ones of prisoners, providing, suggesting, and discussing reading material, being a trusted ear, administrating, sadly, the bereavements of prisoners' loved ones, visiting those who are in segregation units for whatever behaviours they happen to have shown whilst in custody, and most importantly, organising the Catholic provision. Usually, this involves organising attendance for Catholic Sunday Mass, my thanks to Father Paul Willimont. However, since COVID-19, Mass has been and continues to be suspended in custody alongside all congregational worship. Mercy can often be a lived out experience in my role rather than a theory that people can talk about. For example, helping an illiterate prisoner to read and write could be a short thing. They might need to write a letter to mum, to their partner, to their children, that sort of thing. Communicating with prisoners' loved ones to assure them of their relatives' welfare when they've run out of phone credit, for example, because often we get grandmothers, as a good example, who are worried sick about prisoners because the men inside choose to ring whoever they choose to. Their credit runs out like that, and grandmothers are there being doting grandmothers. We offer prayers on anniversaries of the deaths of loved ones. Probably my personal favourite small bit of mercy in the role. Always feels a bit like people going to the graveside of a departed loved one and making that journey. We get to make the men feel like they've made their mark on the anniversary of such a sombre day. We can refer various issues to the uniformed staff in the building or the relevant parties indeed. One of the greatest, perhaps, acts of mercy in such an environment is the simple act of listening. Mercy is found in patience and the giving of one's time in the prison setting. Most often than not, when I talk to any kind of inmate in HMP Leeds, you listen to someone, you may not even offer advice, you just stand there and listen to what they're saying and sort of, your way through the conversation, giving a little bit of advice here and there. And even if you haven't provided a solution or a useful answer, so often some of these sufferings and problems can't have like that, the men will turn around at the end and say, thank you for your time. And it's quite an interesting one. It's obviously for me, certainly during COVID-19, when it's been 23-hour bang up for men inside, it does show you, whether through a cell door, whether out on a landing, it is a setting in which people do not feel listened to. So when in the media and in the newspapers and the news, you hear about, the stereotype of a prisoner losing their temper a little bit and doing who knows what and becoming angry and ending up down a segregation unit, it's not the full story as such, because any of us, I'm sure, like with the COVID-19 lockdown, find frustration a different animal altogether in such settings. I've also been asked to offer some quick thoughts on the role itself. I personally find it very, very fulfilling because of the rather unique pace to it. It can be a slow, fast job. I personally have never encountered one like that before. So one day I can find myself zipping around wings rather frantically or phoning several different agencies to confirm and collate information in a hurried way between hospitals and undertakers and so on. The next day it could be calmer with one-to-one sessions and prayer groups and even more time for personal prayer and reflection. Hearing the trials and suffering of the men inside also helps me shift my perspective to gratitude for one's blessings, which in itself is quite a blessing from my point of view. It allows me to realize if you're having a day where you're feeling a bit self-pitying, hearing such stories always helps to push your own understanding and perspective. But for me, I've found in this role a way to live my faith day to day, whilst encouraging others to live upstanding moral lives, both in a Christian Catholic sense and as hopefully reformed citizens. Some quick notes before I conclude. My thanks to obviously Deacon Joe and Tom Chigbo for organising this initiative and actually visiting HMP Leeds with their commissioners in tow and taking the time to engage with us and have a view of what the prison's like. I have read the excellent report, and like Jane, I encourage you all to take time to read through that, because it presents a broad spectrum, picking on, like they've intended to do, different agencies and those was in different roles. My thanks also to Father Paul Willamant and Monsignor Peter Rosser, without whose efforts Holy Mass would not be celebrated behind bars at HMP Leeds. We also try to run 2 appeals a year, one for Christmas and one for Easter, providing some festive cheer for the Catholic men. Please do keep your eyes peeled on parish bulletins and the like. And if you'd like to get involved in some way, do get in touch and we'll see what we can do. We're currently working with some local branches of the SVP and looking, hopefully, if there is such a thing, beyond COVID-19 times. We'd love to increase our pool of volunteers, prison visitors, or just Catholics or Christians willing to assist us. You will have to go through a security check, which on average takes about a year, to gain clearance and get a staff badge. So it's not a quick procedure, but everyone we've had who's done it, I promise you can say it's been, just like Jane was saying with her volunteers, has found it massively rewarding. But other than that, I'd just like to thank you for taking the time to listen and tune in, and God bless, and do continue to keep all of prisoners across the prison estate, but obviously HMP Leeds, in your prayers as well. Thank you.